Thank you all for having me once again, and welcome all to your Positive Action Ministry, where everything we do is positive. I'm your host today, Abel Jimenez, for this your study of Isaiah chapter 36. Okay, and in this chapter we have a title as Sennacherib threatens Israel. Put your trust in the Lord only. All right, and we get into that a little bit more later. Before we dive into Isaiah 36, let's do a small recap of Isaiah chapter 35. In Isaiah chapter 35, we remember that the name of it was Joy of the Redeemed. Okay. We began the chapter talking about how the wastelands, the deserts will be turned into a blessed, fruitful, and glorious joy. We were introduced to the phrase that they were going to give the blessings of Lebanon, which means fruit-producing land. God tells us that He is going to make His people strong. By this, we meant the needy. We also learned that throughout the chapter that when we are talking about the people of Israel after famine and after many things that they have endured, there was a lot of people that were particularly in need. In the chapter, it specifically names the blind, the lame, the mute, and the deaf. Okay, we are introduced toward the middle of the chapter to this phrase, the highway of holiness, or the holy highway. And it's just talking about, again, the desolate land that is going to be provided for those people that are righteous in the Lord and that have protest a claim of forgiveness and submission to the Lord. The pathway is going to be provided to them. As the chapter continues, we learn about God's blessings offered to those that have been redeemed. Now, when we talked about the redeemed throughout chapter 35, we learn once again that it has to do with those people that ask for repentance. By this time, the people of Israel have gone through several rebellious periods. We learn in chapter 33 and chapter 32 that the phrase of going down to Egypt, meaning spiritually going down to Egypt for seeking of help instead of turning to the Lord, is something that is now favorably looked upon from God. So by the time that Isaiah 35 comes along, we talked about the concept of redemption through submission again to the Lord. The chapter closes with a vision of everlasting joy. And when we talk about everlasting joy, is mainly targeting the redeemed, those that have asked for forgiveness and have come back to the Lord. And we actually closed the chapter in our last teaching, at least that you guys had with me, with the phrase that joy is the outcome of faithfulness. And faithfulness, once again, is to actually rely in God and rejoicing always. Okay, this leads us to Isaiah chapter 36. In Isaiah chapter 36, we learned that Sennacherib threatens Israel. And we are going to learn who this person is as we go along. But before we do that, I actually want to give you a overlook of what the entire chapter comprises of. It sets the stage for the upcoming chapters. In the next few chapters of the book of Isaiah, we're going to learn of the Assyrian invasion of Israel, north and south of Israel. Right now, we're going to focus on the people of Judea, and we are going to learn about the king of Judea of that time. Which leads me to the question, who is Hezekiah? The pronunciation, I want to get it right, guys. Hezekiah. Who is Hezekiah? Come on, anybody. We all should know this. Go ahead, Ralph.
Isn't he the king? The king of Judah that's losing?
Correct. That is the king of Judah. To be more specific, the king of Judah, from approximately, historians put it between 700 BC to 686 BC, all right? So a period of about 30 years. He was the king of Judah. Now, this is historically has been confirmed by both biblical historian and non-biblical historians, like this person did exist, and he was actually the ruler of this region for a period of time. Now, the timing of it is only placed there because at the time, the Assyrian Empire was trying to consolidate and to actually focus their powers both in the whole Palestinian region, which actually involves a little bit of what's going on today, if you know what I mean, that entire area, and the rest of the already conquered Assyrian empires, okay? So this is a very important character in the people of Judea at the time. And we're going to learn more about that in chapters 37 and 38, okay? This chapter also highlights the king's reliance on God. This is a period where, once again, the people of Israel have come back to the Lord, but he also offers opportunity for another period of rebellions. And if you will, this presents a little bit more of another test to actually see the people's willingness to submit to God first and always. This presents the setting for the test of the people of Judea and what they will endure. If they are actually conquered by the Assyrian Empire, we learn, not only historically, but biblically, that there's going to be a lot of troubles and tribulations, especially for the fact that the Assyrians brought with them a lot of gods. It deals with the questions of confidence, the people of Israel in God. And this is a specific one that has to do with not just the king, Hezekiah himself, but what he entrusts in the people to do in the face of this threat being dealt with in chapter 36. All right. So now let's move on to a couple of questions. Who is Rabshakeh? I think that one. Rabshakeh.
There's no N.
There you go. Rabshakeh. Let's see. Oh, I think that's Brandon's hand. Go ahead.
Is he the one of the advisors to the king?
He's not necessarily an advisor to the king. Who is he, Diana? Oh, okay.
I don't
All
know.
right. Papi, ¿usted sabe quién es Rabshakeh? Oh, I thought he had his hand up. But apparently he doesn't. All right. Let's see. Go, Renee.
Isn't he an advisor to the king of Assyria?
He's not an advisor to the king per se, okay? He's not an advisor. He's a commander. He's an Assyrian commander. The chapter itself speaks to us that this is an Assyrian commander. So the king itself sends him with a brigade of soldiers, okay, with a large number of soldiers to deliver a message to Hezekiah. This man is specifically sent by the king of Assyria for specific skills. He is ruthless and did not like the people of Judah and Israelite for that fact as a whole. I did a little bit of research on this person, and non-historical scholars actually put this guy up there with the likes of like Napoleon, if you will, as far as being a strategic, ruthless person when it came to actually overtaking and conquering places, okay? He is a mastermind. He's a puppetry. He employs definitely different types of scare tactics, and we see this in chapter 36 when he is addressing the people that Hezekiah sent to actually the messengers for Hezekiah to actually receive, let's say, the message. He actually addresses the people entirely in Aramaic. He actually speaks to them in their language. And the main reason that he did that is because it was as scare tactics for the people. When he addresses them after he gives the message that he's trying to send to Hezekiah, that's the message that is being sent to him. He actually addresses the people to try to gain their trust and to implant fear in them directly. This guy is very smart. At that time, you had sort of a understanding, if you will, where, let's say, the messengers of the kings, or let's say the heads of the armies would meet, and then they would talk among each other. This guy actually did something more so. He actually were able to talk about all the other places that they have conquered and how many gods they have technically, quote unquote, defeated, and how lack of protection they had directly to the people. And in there, we learned that Hezekiah his instructions to the people of Judah at that time were, do not engage him. At one point, we learned in chapter 36 that it clearly says that Hezekiah had instructed the people of Judea to stay quiet and do not answer. What do you think that is? Anybody cares to take a guess? Go ahead, Rene.
Because I mean, they did. I believe that the king of Judah didn't want Rabshakeh to think that the people were afraid, because he tells the people, well, I'm not gonna say it almost. Go ahead.
Okay, no, that's a very good and educated guess. Brandon, go ahead.
I assume he says don't do it to the public tongue because it could cause fear to the people and make them doubt God and Hezekiah.
Okay, all right. Well, Hezekiah, from what I've learned, okay, from other books and everything like that, Hezekiah, both in the New Testament and the Old Testament, Hezekiah knew his enemy, the enemy that was coming. He knew that this person would be, again, the people, the Assyrian commander that was sent was going to be a mastermind, and he spoke many languages, that this person was an educated, knowledgeable, but a very cruel man. So he was like, okay, do not engage him, because that could actually be used also in like as an excuse to actually overtake them. So that was one of the reasons that he instructed them not to speak directly. He's part of it because he knew what the enemy was going to bring. In addition to that, I also learned that he was fearful. See, Hezekiah, at this point in time, he already knew that they were knocking at his door, and he was very fearful of what the Assyrian Empire was going to bring down upon the people of Judea. Now let's move to Sennacherib. Sennacherib. There you go. Sennacherib. There you go. Go ahead, Renan.
The king of Assyria.
That's correct. The king of Assyria. And again, at the beginning of my recapping here, I mentioned that this is the person that was trying to consolidate the Assyrian power, mainly trying to concentrate it to the territories that they had conquered, but he had set his eyes on the people of Judea and the Israelites as a whole, because he didn't want to take the place of what Palestine is as a whole, the whole entire region in there. He also wanted to do it in a specific way. So I gotta ask, why do you think that Sennacherib wanted Hezekiah to surrender? Why do you think he would want that specifically? Rene?
Because that saves life. That saves his soldier's life if they surrender without fighting.
Very good.
I mean, I don't want to go ahead of the chat. You might ask this question, but that's when the general, one of his general is addressing the people. You have a question about that? I'm gonna ruin it.
No. That's fine. That's fine, because this is important for us to know, right? So he wanted to preserve the lives of his own soldiers, right? He wanted to actually say, like, you know what? It's cheaper that way. He even sent horses. He actually, during the chapter, we actually learned that Rabshakeh wanted to actually give them horses if they can manage. You know what I mean? But the trick is that they had done that before, the Assyrians, because those people then become fighters for the Assyrian army. So instead of you losing men, you actually gain soldiers by actually doing it this way. Once again, shows the intelligence and the mastermind of what the Assyrian Empire was. And again, I have to mention, they wanted to consolidate power to that region, okay? For the most part, that's mainly what the chapter is. I don't want to get ahead, because in chapter 37 and 38, we're going to learn some valuable, important lessons, and I don't want to foreshadow those, okay? But for now, let me just speak about some takeaways. Rene, why don't you hold your questions, comments, or concerns to the end real quick, just so that way I can finish my recap here, if you don't mind, all right? So my takeaways right now, I want to make sure that I am able to apply this to today's world, okay? And the first thing as I read through this chapter is that we must trust in God faithfully, okay? Now, nowadays it's very easy for us not to do that because we have so many quote unquote tools at our disposal. However, a lot of those things become our own enemy and or adversaries at times. We don't necessarily need to have an actual enemy like they did, let's say in Isaiah chapter 36, but we do go through adversities that are actually impacting us and forces to, it places us in a place that we should be faithful to God first and always. We got to make sure that we place our allegiance to where it matters with God. The other takeaway that I got from this chapter has to be with seeking trustworthy, wise counsel. Now, in today, we actually, our main wisest tool that we have at our disposal is Google search. All right, that's our wisest advice for everything we do. Is like we go to technology, well now ChatGPT and other things of that nature. Nonetheless, we already have at our disposal. If you're faithful to God, you will see that God has placed people around you at all times. I gotta give props to my uncle Ralph because he mentioned how the minister, let's say, has always been there for him in times of not only just in counsel, but also as an example. So to actually say that Theo Ralph should go to Google and search for different answers where he could just go and sit down with the minister and study the Bible whenever he's facing adversary or has a plain old enemy is actually a foolish thing. But nonetheless, this is what we find ourselves doing more and more every day. My third takeaway from this is to be mindful of deception and falsehood. This is something that I gather from Theo Ralph's preaching. He actually used the scriptures of Luke 10, and in there, he speaks to us about, the importance of being good to our neighbors, right? Which was his message today. He gave an example of how there was a minister or preacher, and I guess one of his people walking by, and they never do anything to help the other person of the example that he was giving. And I gotta tell you, this took me right there to that, okay? The reason why that type of stuff happens, Ralph, is because we actually put our trust in men. It's easy for me to follow, let's say, hypothetically speaking, if my uncle was to give me the wrong example to follow and not care about the people that are surrounding me. It's easy for me to do that action by just seeing him doing that action instead of trusting what the word says. If you actually go to your Bible, you will find the answers that you need for any and all situations of your life. But you have to do it wholeheartedly. You have to trust the process and embrace it. It's not enough just to learn how to read and just recite it. You have to make sure that you embrace it. Okay. Always pray before any move. When I was reading this chapter, the first thing that came to mind is, why did Hezekiah did not trust to the Lord, surrender, prayed for actual wisdom, for actual guidance, instead of just, let's say, acting to see what the enemy had brought to his doorsteps? No, I believe that he should have had prayed, because that's the first thing that came to mind when I was researching this chapter. And I gotta say, oftentimes it's just, it was true then and it's true now. In this chapter, I learned that we've been making this mistake for so many thousands of years. We make God the tail, not the head. And this is what I mean by that. It's not until the problems have gotten this big that we actually say, let me go to God and pray. Okay? It's not at the beginning of the situation that from the very beginning that we actually say, oh, let me pray and put it in God's hand, or let me ask for guidance of God. Instead, what we do is all the way at the end that we actually say, oh, could you help me out, Lord, and so far, so on. So don't make God the tail, make God the head of all your decisions. The last takeaway that I have is never forget who has delivered you in times of crisis. Okay. In our church, we oftentimes share testimonies with one another. But I gotta say, even with doing that, it is so easy for us to forget our very last adversity, even if it was 1 week ago. Okay, and now we are in a better place. We tend to forget those things easily, and knowing that God is the one that gets us through all of them. Those are my takeaways for today. Hope that you guys enjoy it. Now I do want to answer any questions, comments, or concerns. Go ahead, Rene.
No, I just wanted to say something. I don't know why I remember this part.
Mhm.
When the Assyrian general was having the conversation with the representative of King Hezekiah,
Mhm.
they tried to get him to speak in Aramaic, the Assyrian Empire language, and he said, "No, why should I say that? Because what this concern to them." Then he starts speaking to
Yeah.
them, and
Yeah.
I tell them that I don't know why I remember all this. Today is a miracle, and he said to them, "But they should be concerned because they are the ones who are gonna be eating their own feces
Yeah.
and drinking their own urine." And then he said, "But your Lord told us to destroy Israel. Is that true? The God told them." And I know the
So-
punishment was coming to them because we saw by former prophets. But did the Lord told him to
So-
destroy Israel?
So I gotta say, okay, according to my research, remember I said, and I had it in here, in my description, my number one description after saying that he was a commander is that he was ruthless, and my second one, it was that he was a mastermind. Okay, this guy was a mastermind. And that was a scare tactic, number one, that he had for the people of Judea, to speak to them in their native tongue. So that way, okay, there was no need to actually intimidate Hezekiah, but sort of to implant division from within. That is my takeaway from that, to answer that first part of your question. The second part is that you mentioned if God have given this revelation to them. Now, I don't think that I need to explain to you how that is false, considering that in many occasions we learned that the Assyrians don't necessarily practice or follow the teachings, biblical teachings of our God. They actually believed in many gods. They actually believed in the destruction of the people of Israel. They started with Judea, but it was the entire region that they had destruction for. And it's not necessarily that they were commanded, that they knew of this. Now, this is a very intelligent person, educated person that knew of the teachings and knew that the people of Israel were to be punished, okay, and that God would allow it at different times. My estimate is, and this is just my estimate on it, is that he already had knowledge of this, and therefore he was using it to his advantage in trying to send that message to Hezekiah. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. And if I wanted to say just to finish, that practice of asking the enemy to surrender in the Muslim book, the Holy Quran, they are commanded to ask if the people want to surrender to avoid bloodshed. That it's interesting that all those people who used to fight Israel, who are now Muslim today, they still continue the same thing, trying to grab that little piece of land. It's amazing.
And that's why I started that. I said it's interesting that we're talking about this chapter, considering everything that is going on today. Thank you, Rene. I think your Ralph had his hand up.
Yeah, you know that you mentioned at the beginning that they attack Israel in the north and the south, and I just wonder, territory-wise, how was Israel back then compared to now? It was like bigger country, smaller country, or just the same?
No, Israel, the wall of Israel, homie, that you know of Israel itself, when we're talking about the capital and everything, geographically speaking, for the most part, geographically speaking, is still the same.
The same?
The
Oh,
territories that we're talking about, geographically speaking, is still the same.
oh,
See, everything involving the Jordan River, if you go historically speaking, one side or the other, for the most part, We have maps, not only, I'm not talking about biblical maps. I'm talking about just secular maps that confirm it. We also know from biblical encounters and for other writings, okay, that we learned that the area is mainly the same geographically speaking. Where it differs is the territories that the 12 tribes of Israel control and where they live. At one point or another, you know what I mean, the different tribes were in different areas of what it is Israel today. Okay, Brandon?
Yeah, my question is just at the end they show up at the king with torn clothes. Is there significance to that, or would you just kind of like beat up?
Yes. To I'm glad that you mentioned that because I didn't include it, but in one of my readings, he actually shows that the Hezekiah was very scared, was fearful, and you're gonna see this in chapter 37 and 38. Very fearful of this grandiose enemy. Okay. However, I think that the significance of the torn clothes is that whatever, let's say, power they thought they had meant nothing. That's what I think is the significance of it. However, their lives were spared still. To your point, Rene, by the way, the Assyrians didn't always, let me be clear about this, the Assyrians did not always ask the people to surrender. That's not true. That's not historically accurate, okay? They were very ruthless, okay? However, in this case, it was strategic for them to do so, all right? It was strategic for them to do so. But I think the torn clothes actually represents a point of humility, Brandon, if it makes sense to you.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you, Abel, for the lesson.
Very good, very good.
And sometimes like that, war, whether it's now